today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the moon. Buy me some.
The Monday Morning Quarterback from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Our episode on the 2nd of July, 2018, the first program for 2018. We remember our broadcast partner, Jerry Pippin, who died in 2015. We always remember him on Monday mornings. Nonetheless, as we move along here, Shaq is on his way to the Lakers. And we'll get the sports in here right away. We won't mess around with it at all. That, in fact, he is on his way. In the FIBA World Cup, Spain and Russia, they were tied 1-1, but in the penalty it ended up Russia winning it. Croatia and Denmark also 1-1, but Croatia ended it, 3-1, I believe, was the final score there. And if we move to Shaq very, very quickly here, a 4-year deal he's getting with the Lakers. He is leaving Cleveland on his way to bigger and better things, as one would say. Here, it's a similar pattern followed by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and various other luminaries that have left teams. Kareem left Milwaukee, moved to the Lakers, had numerous championships there. This is a 4-year contract, $153 million contract. Of course, it will be announced through his agency group deal. And one of the things about LeBron James, I always mispronounce his name, but he's leaving Cleveland because, again, Cleveland doesn't have the personnel. As a free agent for the second time in his career 4 years ago, Mr. James had stated his intention to finish his career with the Cavaliers. But whether the 4-time MVP, 19-time All-Star does that, it does not. Left uncertain in the city he has made. This was evidently a story published before he departed, period. But again, the personnel just were not there in Cleveland. Kobe Bryant, welcome to the family. This is Kobe on Twitter. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I'm sure the Laker Nation is rejoicing. The acquisition of LeBron James means that the Lakers are just a smidgen away from being real contenders. Congratulations also from Magic Johnson there. And the Lakers, yes, the Lakers are in better shape. They will need to get some additional players. Magic James called the Laker president basketball operations, Magic Johnson, before he sent the announcement out on Twitter. Many people are doing that now, period. Using Twitter long since has been there. And with free agent target, Paul George, prior to George's announcement, he would re-sign with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So a number of people out there. The Lakers agreed to a one-year contract deal with Kenvelis Caldwell. That was $4.3 million there. Lance Stevenson and a one-year minimum deal with JaVale McGee. So some other people there. But they're looking at the points. Of course, Kareem is on top with 38,000 points. And then you have Karl Malone. We don't forget Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain. And then Dirk, excuse me. I remember old Dirk and LeBron James at 31,000 points. And lastly, Shaquille O'Neal at 28,000 points there. So that's some of that. So the Shaq legend is being made, no doubt about it, shaping there. But also congratulations to Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. He is elected president of Mexico. Tonight he'll take office in December. He was even congratulated by none other than DJ Trump. Congratulations to Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador on becoming the next president of Mexico. I look very much forward to working with him. There is so much to do that will benefit both countries. That's from DJ Trump. Lopez Obrador, seen here riding in an automobile, something you not see a president riding in here. But we'll get a special program up on this on BR on the World. We were looking to get his acceptance speech. So he has been an organizer for much of his adult life. He's 64 years old. So he's been in the trenches for a very long time. Again, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the Presidente-elect of Mexico. I'd been monitoring Mexican TV all night long, and we'll go there just
nacionales e internacionales para reunirnos las veces que sean necesarias y elaborar el plan de reconciliación y paz para México que aplicaremos desde el inicio del próximo gobierno. Me reuniré todos los días, una vez que asuma el cargo de presidente, desde muy temprano, desde las 6 de la mañana, con los miembros del Gabinete de Seguridad Pública. Es decir, habrá mando único, coordinación, perseverancia y profesionalismo. Seremos amigos de todos los pueblos y de todos los gobiernos del mundo. En política exterior se volverán a aplicar los principios de no intervención, de autodeterminación de los pueblos y de solución pacífica de las controversias. Y como decía el presidente Juárez, nada por la fuerza, todo por la razón y el derecho. Con el gobierno de Estados Unidos buscaremos una relación de amistad y de cooperación para el desarrollo, siempre fincada en el respeto mutuo y en la defensa de nuestros paisanos migrantes que viven y trabajan honradamente en ese país. Amigas y amigos, agradezco las muestras de solidaridad que he recibido de dirigentes y de organizaciones sociales, políticas y religiosas de los distintos países del mundo. Ya hemos contestado las primeras llamadas de felicitación de jefes de Estado y de gobierno de algunos países. A todos, nuestro sincero agradecimiento y respeto. Debo reconocer el comportamiento respetuoso del presidente Enrique Peña Nieto en este proceso electoral. Muy diferente, porque me consta, al trato que nos dieron los pasados titulares del Poder Ejecutivo. Fue ejemplar la pluralidad y el profesionalismo de la prensa, la radio y la televisión. Los medios de información no fueron, como en otras ocasiones, correas de transmisión para la guerra sucia. También mi gratitud a las benditas redes sociales. Reitero el compromiso de no traicionar la confianza que han depositado en mí millones de mexicanos. Voy a gobernar con rectitud y justicia. No les fallaré. No voy a decepcionarles. No voy a traicionar al pueblo. Mantengo ideales y principios, que es lo que estimo más importante en mi vida. Pero también confieso que tengo una ambición legítima. Quiero pasar a la historia como un buen presidente de México. Deseo, anhelo con toda mi alma poner en alto la grandeza de nuestra patria, ayudar a construir una sociedad mejor y conseguir la dicha y la felicidad de todos los mexicanos. Muchas gracias de todo corazón. ¡Que viva México! ¡Viva México! ¡Viva México!
We'll leave that forecast there, and we'll move to our general review that we have on the week that was. Incidentally, after we leave, we'll hear from a variety of edited versions from Meet the Press. They'll be basically talking about the judicial nominations. The same thing will be over at they have, incidentally, Cokie Roberts there now, and I think about it. She's been around a long time. As LBJ would say, she's been around since Christ was a proverbial corporal. And giving analysis on what is happening there with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, and you'll hear this in various places, a matter of messaging that the leadership, they were interviewing the leader of the Senate, Schumer, and Schumer doesn't have a plan. And one of the problems here, and the Democrats have had a year and a half to think about this, is to come up with messaging to counter DJ Trump. They now know what DJ Trump's message is, but they have not got a message that is clear and coherent. Now, some candidates do, in fact, have one that is resonating. We'll hear from Ms. Cortez, who ran in New York and had a clear message. Now, there is some, we won't say confusion, but there is different stratagems running. For instance, the idea of abolishing ICE. Well, the situation is ICE is a law enforcement function of Homeland Security, the Border Patrol, etc. Now, these people are under the direction of the Trump administration, which is a different direction. But you can't isolate ICE from law enforcement agencies all over America that have taken on this very aggressive attitude. And it's much more aggressive than it was under Barack Obama, under DJ Trump, the American First Nativist attitude, the indiscriminate killing of African Americans, other people of color. That is something that's been showing up. We were looking at the Oregonian. There was a killing there of a naval veteran who was trying to break up a fight at a sports club by two coppers from Oregon, from Portland University. And so we're seeing this all over the place. So you have to look at the ICE situation as a situation from all of law enforcement, not just ICE. So when you talk about abolishing that particular agency, you can also play into the hands of DJ Trump and his rhetoric, because people tend to get confused, especially when he talks about, quote-unquote, these criminals. One of the things he's not given out, at least I've not seen it, is the number of these so-called hardcore criminals that ICE has been able to, quote-unquote, apprehend, period. So this is something, in other words, when you're running a political campaign, you have to be very, very careful, particularly on the national level. I'm not talking about on the local level, on the state level, with candidates jumping out here, sloganeering or being opportunistic. Now, several candidates running for president, some of them, we're thinking of Twitter King Booker, who was deposed by DJ Trump, trying to match the rhetoric of some others, and Ms. Harris, Senator Harris out of California, some of the rhetoric, but she's been a state's attorney, so she knows about law enforcement. That's how she got her start. So don't be fooled by the symbolism involved here, and by the quote-unquote sound bites. This is going to take hard work to deal with that. The demonstrations that were on a Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people turned out all across America, and this was on immigration to families. The unfortunate situation is that immigration in many parts of the U.S. is not on the front burner, period. Now, in some of the border states it is and it isn't. Some of those border cities, that say in Texas and elsewhere, have been coexisting forever with the cross-border in Mexico, and they basically have some of the same population, and the language set there is Espanol. What has changed is people coming across the border from other parts of Central America, and you're going to see some solutions to some of that. But the problem is when you have these disruptions in these semi-fascist countries that are following after the U.S. and are supported by the U.S. dollars, their military, etc., you're going to have this type of situation occur. There's no way around it. So immigration is one of those issues that will be out here, but for the Democrats, it cannot be their only issue. They have to pattern their campaign, and we'll listen here in a minute to Ms. Cortez. Let me just move on around here. I'll just go briefly into this one. This is about payday loans from the Washington Post, the monetizing of poor people, how equity firms make money offering loans to cash-strapped Americans. They give as an example here Stephen Huggins. He had a 2005 pickup truck, and it needed repairs, and he got a loan. He's 56 years old, heavy equipment operator in Nashville. And he got the check, what was the check? $1,200 in the mail. Now, they make that easy. The interest rate was $3,300. And the Mariner Financial Corporation sued him for $3,221.27, including the original $1,200. Added on $800, additional $800 represented later persuaded him to take some hundreds of dollars more. That's their operation. Usually what happens is a person will borrow $1,000 and they'll say, well, you need a couple of $100 more. That added 20%, 500 and additional 20%, I should say, $536. So this is one of the things, but on top of that, the president of Warburg Pinnacle is no other than old Tim Gantner, who was the Secretary-Treasurer under Barack Obama, who condemned the predatory lenders at the time, but now he has thrown in with them. He's the president of that operation. What happens here, these venture capitalist companies have interest in, is like Mariner Financial, and they are the money behind them, period. The company's other tactics include borrowing money for as little as 4 or 5%, thanks to the bond market, lending rates as high as 36%. Nick, the leg breaker, used to demand less than that. I think he was getting like a 20%. But the problem here is more than the leg breaker. He would break your legs, but these people will break your life, period. This Mariner's branches have risen 8-fold. In other words, they're opening up like pancakes on Boston Street. These various ones out there, and they're getting hundreds of thousands in there. Prominent brands of the day are Money Mart, Speedy Cash, Ace Cash Express, check cashing store owned by private equity funds. And they make loans from $1,000 to $25,000. Their one main financial is slated to be purchased by Apollo Global, led by a millionaire, Leon Black. So these characters all play in here. Of course, the Trump organization is playing along with them. Mariner Financial LLC is one of several Mariner entries. Documents show a net profit before taxes of $34 million. That includes the past years of $145 million, assets totaling $561 million. Two independent accountants looked at it. The former Treasury Secretary Gantner, the predatory lenders and exonerated predatory lenders and their role in Wall Street meltdown in 2007. And this just shows you how these characters go in and out. He even wrote a book, this is old Gantner, on stress tests. And in November of 2013, it was announced that old Gantner would join this Warburg Pinnacus as the president. Months earlier, one of the firm's funds had purchased this Mariner Financial for $234 million. Now, when you start talking about that kind of money, obviously there's a lot of money to be made. This is a very long article, so I won't finish it all off. But also another racket they have is selling insurance policies. London Southern and Life of the South, it figures, two companies that often give sales commissions as much as 50% of the premium price. That's according to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. The Mariner profits from insurance sales is through an insurance company registered in Turks. There, Mariner sells the insurance policy written by the two companies. The two companies, in turn, buy and reinsure Mariner's affiliates. Last year, the two companies ceded $20 million in premiums, according to filings in Delaware. That's where they're located. So in other words, a lot of money they are making there. Some registers call for insurers to allocate at least 60% of premium collections for covering customer claims. By contrast, some of these from the Life of the South, as little as 20%, return as little as 20% to consumers. Policies from London Southern offer as little as 9% on the average. So in other words, you don't get very much out of these characters, period. And a headline from the Post here, we were just talking about a bad week for Democrats, give a rise to a big problem. Outrage could become an obstacle in the midterm elections. Well, this is where the monopoly press plays in here. It won't become an obstacle because much of this is local. We talked about the abolish ISIS thing. Trump will treat it as a law enforcement problem. And how this plays is into Trump's neighborhood program that the police are included in there. But this doesn't affect people that oppose this type of stuff. What this is to rally around the base. And the base will basically go along with anything. Some of the base, and they cite Michael Moore. You'll hear from him in our little roundup here. Called on the party to abandon focus on warm and fuzzy notions like hope. Well, you got to have hope. This was, and we played this song from Barack Obama's campaign window, very embrace hardball tactics. Example, he's proposed surrounding the Capitol with 1 million protesters. Remember when we surrounded the Pentagon back in the late 60s? We didn't have 1 million people there to keep Republicans from voting. Well, they would just vote from home. So Mr. Moore needs to get more realistic here. Kamala Harris, this is Harris of California, a presidential candidate, called for more street protests. There was 750 rallies out there. Rallies bring out the faithful. It's sort of like, I never forget this, in downtown Seattle as the campaign was closing, we filled up downtown Seattle. This was Dr. McGovern's campaign for president in 1972. But what we later found out, our voting base was out there. So that was basically it. Oh, let's see. This is Harris here. This is appealing to a base. You have to have a fire plug to get going. President Obama urged Democrats to fundraise in Beverly Hills to aim their energies squarely on the ballot box. He's correct about this. It is entirely within our power. No doubt about that. You have to think about how to get your people out to vote, your base, and how to expand the base. So they look at independence. Here's a very shaky situation there. Others have cautioned against demands for transformative policies, including the abolish, costly guarantee of government jobs. Well, the government jobs are not a problem. Free college, a lot of states in Tennessee, they have free college, at least community college, at least the first year of community college. So that's in a Republican state. There is a big difference between strategic messaging target to win an election and emotion the emotional thing is something you don't want in politics at this particular time. So this is from Steve Israel. He's out of politics now. What sounds good in Brooklyn doesn't work in Brooklyn, Iowa. Well, in Iowa, you have to focus on local issues such as soybeans, etc. But that, in fact, does work. And they signal out Kristen Gillibrand here and Elizabeth Warren if they were replacing ISIS. Well, with a different agency. And I think what has to change are the politics, and the people who are making these politics are making horrendous decisions like separating. That's from Amy Klobuchar in an appearance on ABC's This Week. She's also running for president. There's always going to be a need for immigration enforcement, no doubt about that. Beto O'Rourke, our man in Texas, Democratic Senate candidate, adopted a similar position. And one of the reasons is this abolishment of ISIS is not going to happen in demonstration of radical politics. We always say make a demand. Demand's already been made, it's out there, and now it's time to move on to other things. And this is one of the big problems, sometimes in a messaging that you have to move on. Now, the Tea Party was a different situation. They could come out with ridiculous messaging. That has been on the right for a very, very long time. But what they were able to do was to get the base together that eventually elected DJ Trump on his nativist America First program. Now that's a different situation. Under that big tent, you can put ISIS in there, police departments in there, but murdered people. It really doesn't matter because the base you are playing to, by and large, are not being murdered by the police. So that's one thing to remember. Let's just move on here as we move through this particular situation. This is from the People's World. We always go there. U.S. is allowing Nestle to pump water from drought-ridden California. The U.S. Forest Service, Nestle, a free year permit Wednesday to keep pumping millions of gallons. Shouldn't be doing that. This is from the San Bernardino National Forest in California. This is from the Associated Press. Bad situation there entirely. And let's see if we can... this is another headline. People versus money. Socialist beats Wall Street Democrat. No doubt about that. This is from Alexandria-Ocasio-Cortez. And we'll listen to her commercial. She 58 to 42. Somebody said it was a low turnout election. I'm not certain as to how low the turnout is, but listen to her commercial. This is a matter of messaging and how she put that over in Brooklyn.
Women like me aren't supposed to run for office. I wasn't born to a wealthy or powerful family. Mother from Puerto Rico, dad from the South Bronx. I was born in a place where your zip code determines your destiny. My name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm an educator, an organizer, a working-class New Yorker. I've worked with expectant mothers, I've waited tables and led classrooms. And going into politics wasn't in the plan. But after 20 years of the same representation, we have to ask, who has New York been changing for? Every day gets harder for working families like mine to get by. The rent gets higher, healthcare covers less, and our income stays the same. It's clear that these changes haven't been for us, and we deserve a champion. It's time to fight for a New York that working families can afford. That's why I'm running for Congress. This race is about people versus money. We've got people, they've got money. It's time we acknowledge that not all Democrats are the same. That a Democrat who takes corporate money, profits off foreclosure, doesn't live here, doesn't send his kids to our schools, doesn't drink our water or breathe our air, cannot possibly represent us. What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a federal jobs guarantee, and criminal justice reform. We can do it now. It doesn't take 100 years to do this. It takes political courage. A New York for the many is possible. It's time for one of us. Vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on June 26th.
Well, they did vote for Alexandria Cortez on June 26th. And you look at the messaging there, listen to the messaging there, very, very important. She talked about money. And that's how the messaging has to be put out there. As far as free public schools, the City College was a free college for a very, very long time. And you also had a system of free colleges in California. And you now have that in Tennessee. That's going to be much more popular. As far as Medicare for All is concerned, that is not a radical program. I've talked to conservative associates in information technology, and they admit that that is coming. It is no doubt coming because the present medical care system is falling apart. The Republicans' plans to what they would call modernize Medicare will simply just not work. And on Medicare, the more and more people are relying on it as the economy moves on. We'll be talking more about that. Very interesting piece we had when we reviewed this book, talking about the present-day economy and how Karl Marx would look at it. The situation has not changed. He talked about typewriting machines. They are coming. And the knowledge economy, how knowledge is traded about basically as a commodity. And as we go on, we'll see more and more of this happening. Just look at how companies are transforming various stratagems. Google, for instance, is moving from their partially open-sourced Linux kernel program to something called Fuchsia, which will be a non-Linux kernel, period, and it will be chock full of their proprietary software. They claim they will have an emulator there, but that is not. And that is not only across their smartphones, Android platforms, but across their Chrome. So this is just one way that things are changing. We were at a meeting, an open government meeting, and Code for America, one of the big organizations that sponsor these, has moved more and more corporate. They still have the brigades left over, but the funding is not to the brigades. The brigades are on their own. Last night on the Week That Was, we talked about the journalist from the former Denver Post moving to a new newspaper there, and how they're going to raise money for it. They have a Kickstarter going on. Trying to see if I can find Goodbye Denver Post. Anyway, we call the Colorado Sun. So that will be a new way of doing it. They have their Kickstarter campaign out there. They have 1,963 backers and $21,000 pledged to the in 15 more days. If you look on the Week That Was, we have that set out. Let's just hear a little bit of this.
Colorado Sun is the next generation of journalism in Colorado. It's a way for consumers, readers, subscribers, journalists to reclaim the way journalism is done in Colorado.
Colorado Sun is a new way of doing things. We are journalist-owned, we're local, we are digital, we are ad-free.
Colorado Sun is a brand new, different kind of news site that is really a direct relationship between the journalists who will own it and the readers who want to read great stories about Colorado.
It's no secret that things have been hard in the news industry here, and we just as a group see a need for something that's based in Colorado, that's built for Colorado, by people who know Colorado.
We have a huge state, and there are a lot of stories to be told, and the stories that we choose to tell are going.
That's the Colorado Sun. We'll do the rest of sports now. We covered the World Cup, where it is at the present time. Again, Russia cry out there, so they will be there, and so did, I believe, Croatia. Let's do one little look here. Oops. And yeah, they eliminated Spain, and Croatia outwent Denmark. I don't know if there are any. Oh, on Monday we have Brazil, and later today actually, and Mexico. Those are matches coming up. That'll be at 10 o'clock. And then we have Belgium and Japan at 2 o'clock. So they're still coming along here. This is in the 16. Let's take a quick look at. Oops. Well, anyway, we'll do the something we know. The baseball scores. The Sox were in New York. It was all Yankees, 11-1. The Angels were in Cannon Yard. The Orioles finally won the game 8-2. The Tigers were in Toronto. Tigers 9-1. The Brewers were in Cincy. It was all Cincy, 8-2 over the Brewers. The Mets and Marlins in Florida. It was Mets 5-2. The Astros and Rays in Florida. Evidently, the Rays have the Astros number. The score was 3-2. Mr. Charlie Morton lost a game finally. And anyway, in 13, the Nationals were in Philly. Philly pulled that one out 4-3. Atlanta was in St. Louis. Cardinals fell 6-5 there. Oh boy. Anyway, the Cubbies in Wrigley Field took care of business. It was a high-scoring game, 11-10. The line score there for the Twins, it was 16 hits and 1 error. And for the Cubbies, 14 hits and 1 error. Let's see who. John Lester got the win, and Mr. Morrill got the save. The White Sox were in Texas. Sox 10-5, another slugging contest. The line scored 14 hits and 1 error for the Sox, and 11 hits, no errors for the Rangers. Cleveland was in Oakland. 15-3 was the score. Cleveland, they got 20 hits, no errors, and Oakland got 9 hits and 1 error. The Royals and Mariners out in Seattle. Mariners 1-0, shut them out. The Rockies and Dodgers, a game we tuned into. The final score was a 6-4 L.A. over the Rockies. The line score 11 hits for L.A. and 9 hits and 1 error for the Rockies. Mr. Jansen got the save. Mr. Hudson got the win. And the Pirates and Padres down in San Diego. 11-7 was the score there. And the Giants and D-backs, another game that we tuned into earlier. It was, we didn't. I'm sorry. It was 9-4, 16 hits, no errors for the Giants, and 13 hits, no errors for the D-backs. So they're all moving along here. I see if we can get the standing. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do this. We've had some difficulty in the past getting the standings for whatever reason. I have no idea. We like to do it on Monday if at all possible. And here we go. In the American League East, the Yankees are on top. And next is the Sox. They're all playing at least 500. They're playing 607. Or wait a minute. Yeah. And the Sox are 659. So again, that's, yeah. Yankees have 31 wins and 12 losses. The Sox 28 wins and 12 losses. Very similar here. In the Central, this is the American League. Cleveland is on top. Then the Twins, they are 5 games out. Or half game out. Wait a minute. Yeah. I have to look at it very closely here. And then the Tigers, they are 8.5 games out. We don't even have to worry about that one. The rest of the American League out west, the Astros are on top. And Seattle is a half game out. And then comes, who is next? Oakland. They're 8.5 games out. Anyway, in the National League East, who is on top? Atlanta is on top. Then comes Philly. They're 3 games back. And then the Nationals actually only 6 games back. Not bad for them. In the Central, Milwaukee's on top. And the Cubs are half game back. The Cardinals are 5.5 games back. Still a race there. And the Pirates are 8 games back. Well, we're not into the All-Star break yet. In the West, the Diamondbacks are on top. The Dodgers are 2.5 games back. And the Giants are now 2.5 games back, with the Rockies 6 games back and at the bottom of the Padres. Remind everyone, the All-Star balloting is all online. Go to Major League Baseball and find your All-Star ballot, or you can go to whatever.com and find it. We go to Cubs.com, you go to Cardinals.com, etc. The All-Star ballots are there. And vote, vote, vote. I remember when we used to have to go to stadiums to get those. No more. Modernization has hit baseball. This will do it for the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 2nd of July, 2018. We'll have special Independence Day programming on a Wednesday. We'll look at the the state of workers in America, since it is a day of quote-unquote American pride. And we won't be doing American First. We'll be doing Workers First, workers versus corporate monopoly and where they stand, all the way from Iowa to places like Tennessee, Kentucky, anywhere working people are. Out west to California, etc. We'll probably throw something in about the payday loans. We definitely will talk about people like Ms. Cortez and her campaign, where Bernie Sanders is, where these issues of Medicare for all, such things as the minimum of $15 an hour, and some of the little bit of the economic debates. We'll throw those in. We have a number of broadcasts for your perusal. The Open Source Report, that is our open source Liberty Software report, where we look at those movements in software and also in hardware. We look into places like Google, what they are doing, workers' stances there on various things, such as military contracting that Google was doing, and some of the stuff that Facebook is doing. Those movements are becoming much more ripe. They're being joined together, and we'll talk about that. And cited in one article was the teacher protest in very red state of Oklahoma, our late partner Jerry Pippin's base, and Kentucky, etc., and to the high tech. This is a positive development. So everything was not a bad week, period. We also look at privacy. We have the Numbers Man, that's our macroeconomics program. We looked at the economy, where it is, where gasoline prices
Justice
are,
Anthony
where
Kennedy
they're
this
going,
week helped make one
other,
political reality clear.
machinations
Despite his
involving
overall
the Trump
unpopularity,
administration.
President Trump
Have a
is
good
winning,
week, everyone.
and the Democrats right now are reeling. The Supreme Court. Mr. Trump is about to shape the court for a generation by choosing a possible tie-breaking conservative justice, and he's already filled the lower courts with like-minded conservatives. How about the Republican Party? The president's approval rating among Republicans is around 90%. Elected Republicans fear criticizing him, and the party has become a cult of personality, his. How about fake news? Mr. Trump has turned that phrase, which initially referred to the phony Russian-generated stories designed to support his campaign in 2016, into an applause line now to discredit responsible reporting showcasing his misdeeds. How about credibility? If reporters faithfully fact-check the president's serial misstatements, they risk being considered biased. If they don't, the misstatements gain traction. Either way, Mr. Trump wins. The Mueller investigation. The president has succeeded in convincing millions that the investigation is biased, despite trafficking only in innuendo and not providing evidence. Then there's the economy. It is doing well, but it was doing well before he took office. Yet with unemployment down and jobs being created, President Trump is getting this credit. Still, much of Mr. Trump's success is superficial. While he's more popular among Republicans, the pool is shrinking. His trade war, North Korea, or the Mueller investigation all could turn against him, and frankly could turn against him now like North Korea has. But if the Democrats' reaction this week to the Kennedy retirement proved anything, it's that the Democratic Party has not figured out how to succeed in the Trump era.
You know, we Democrats are a big tent.
The Supreme Court fight has exposed a Democratic Party largely united in opposition to the president, but divided over goals, messaging, and tactics.
I think we will have a plan, and it will be announced by the Democratic leader at an appropriate time.
But it's not clear what that plan is. Democrats with 2020 ambitions, eager to win progressive support, are promising the base a fight.
Don't tell me that this battle is one that's already lost. I do not believe that.
This is a fight that is born out of love of country, and we're not going to let anyone take our flag.
We will fight today. We will fight tomorrow.
But the Senate's Democratic leaders are reluctant to give them that fight.
The notion that we can stop them with 49 votes is just not in the cards.
Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is stuck on a procedural argument. In 2016, Democrats ridiculed Senator Mitch McConnell's maneuver to deny Obama appointee Merrick Garland a vote before the election. Now they are adopting the same argument.
Our Republican colleagues in the Senate should follow the rule they set in 2016, not to consider a Supreme Court justice in an election year.
Meanwhile, 3 red state Democrats who voted for Justice Neil Gorsuch are up for re-election in states Mr. Trump won. And they met with the president this week.
I had a great conversation.
In the House, the defeat of New York Congressman Joe Crowley by a rising star left Democrats with no obvious heir apparent to leader Nancy Pelosi, and the calls for Pelosi's new generation of leaders have grown louder. Quizzed on that point, Pelosi fired back.
Well, I'm female, I'm progressive, and the rest of what's your problem?
The stakes for Democrats could not be higher. Kennedy's retirement sets in motion the biggest change on the court in half a century.
Former New Jersey governor and ABC News contributor Chris Christie. Welcome, all of you. Chris Christie, I want to start with you. You just heard what Senator Collins said. This Supreme Court nominee is so important. She said she could not support anyone who wanted to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Well, listen, I think that everyone's going to have their own view on this, and I don't think you're going to have anybody who's going to be that outright about giving their opinion on that case or any other case. And so Senator Collins is going to have to do what every other senator is going to have to do, which is look back at the person's record as a judge, if they've been on the bench for any kind of long period of time, look at their record and their writings and everything else and try to divine from that what they think might happen. I think in the end, though, what the president is most likely to do is to pick someone who he believes takes the right type of judicial approach but has a judicial temperament that's going to be very difficult to attack.
Well, it doesn't seem there's any indication that he's going to choose someone who's more moderate, like Justice Kennedy.
Well, no, I don't think so. And by the way, you know, I kind of laugh about this a little bit as a Republican. Like, who's the moderate on the Democratic side that has been selected lately? I mean, you might be able to argue Justice Breyer every once in a while, but certainly not, you know, Kagan or Ginsburg or Sotomayor.
President Clinton thought Ginsburg was. You know, he was.
Good luck.
He was unhappy about that. But I think the notion of Donald Trump judging somebody's temperament is somewhat odd, and I'm not sure that that's something he's able to do. I think that it's going to be very much advice coming from people in the Senate.
And Matt, do Democrats really have any power to defeat Trump's nominee?
Well, this is an exclamation point on why elections have consequences.
Right, exactly.
And the president has a complete right to nominate a conservative judge to the court. That's what, I mean, the Democrats had that right when they held the presidential office. I do think this, but the Democrats have an obligation and a right of advice and consent and to raise concerns and to generate enthusiasm for what their beliefs are in this. I do think we've come to a point, and reflected in your piece of how divided the country is that I would hope the president would consider possibly nominating somebody that would get more than 50 or 51 votes, because that's the problem we're in. I mean, that's only until.
But I
think
that's the problem. That's the problem.
We have people. My own senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, has already said that there's no one the president could nominate that he would vote for.
But
so how do you get
he'd get killed in the Democratic Party if he did.
I'm not saying it's not smart. It's just the reality
and from
of
a campaigning point of view, the Democrats, they know there's nothing they can do, right? So it's how long can we have this conversation about the next time around, making sure there are more Democratic senators, that kind of thing. All they can do is use it to campaign in 2018 at this point. And so I think one of the things is we're not even going to see any kind of hearings until probably, October? They will be able to keep making this an issue. That's about it.
And you've looked into what kind of potential cases the court could take up. This isn't just about Roe v. Wade.
No, it's not. It's about a lot of the little cases that are working their way through the courts right now that deal with abortion, that deal with gerrymandering, that deal with all of these things. And those are the things, and we saw it. We saw it on Thursday when you had Senator Booker, Senator Kamala Harris, all these people in front of the Supreme Court railing about they have to do everything. What they can do is keep talking and keep yelling about it, and make sure that people know that some of those cases, like what we see in Iowa with the 72-hour ban, what we've seen in Mississippi as well as in Louisiana, that people have those cases in mind, that they know that they need to go to the ballot box to vote for something, and that this is a step towards 2020.
And really, you know, elections do have consequences when it comes to Supreme Court nominations. I covered the Bork nomination. And
remind us about that.
Well, so what happened was Robert Bork was nominated by President Reagan and was a very conservative justice. And people think that he did himself in the hearings, because he did behave in the hearings in a way that was quite arrogant. And I remember when he was asked, why do you want this job? Instead of saying, I want to serve the public, all of that, he said, because it's an intellectual feast. So it was all about and that didn't work for him. But the truth is, he had lost before the hearings because of the election.
So what are the lessons learned there?
And the lessons learned were that I remember talking to a Southern moderate Democrat when such things existed, and I expected him to say, "I'm for Bork," and he said, "I was elected by women and blacks. That's who elected me. Who's against Bork? Women and blacks."
Let me wax philosophical for just a second.
Oh, no. Oh, wow.
Can I leave now?
If we eliminate the expectation that we can't have nominees anymore that can bridge the divide, then we're basically have decided the country is so divided that we may not bother anymore. And today is the anniversary of Gettysburg, right? And in a time where we're in incredible divisions, the greatest battle loss of any battle in the history of the country, and Lincoln's words at the Gettysburg Address, part of that address that he gave, where he said, "We are now engaged in a great civil war, testing the idea, the proposition that a country so conceived and so dedicated can long endure." And I think if once we just say, well, there's no way, the country's too divided, we got to do this is the way it's going to be, I think there should be an expectation of the president that he nominates somebody that isn't able to get Democratic votes. I think we should keep that expectation.
You can wax philosophical all you want, my dad. I just want to say on this 1,500-mile drive, that divide was so stark, people so dug in. It was really eye-opening.
It's the greatest danger to our republic. That is the greatest danger.
Wasn't Merrick Garland wasn't Merrick Garland the example of what you're saying already?
Yes, and look what happened.
Right.
Yeah, but look what happened.
Thank God we have no huge moral issue like slavery, when there can't be nothing like slavery.
We have many moral issues.
Well,
immigration is a moral issue.
I agree with you completely, but it's not something that we're going to go to war over.
Well, wait a second.
Does Donald Trump take any blame for this division?
Well, everybody who's involved in public life takes blame. I mean, let's face it. Everybody who's involved in public life today takes a piece of the blame for where we are, and I don't think it's just the president, although he's the president, so everybody wants to talk about that. But I also, maybe it's because I'm from New Jersey, but I do believe that this country was founded on the idea of argument. It was founded on that idea of debate, division at times, and people going at each other.
But then came together.
Well, listen, but I don't believe that 51 votes is not coming together. You know, in the end, for this and for Supreme Court nominees that are in this time where the issues are so stark, you're not going to find that any longer. And I would also.
But it wasn't until recently they made it. It used to be 60 votes.
Right, exactly.
Wait a second. We're talking about.
Talk about shooting yourself in the foot.
We're talking about 25 years or so, Matt. Not a recent development since we've had that.
No, the 60 votes is within the last 6 years, 5 years. 60 votes in the last 5 years.
When they turn the cameras off on the Hill and elsewhere, is it different? Do you sense that it's different? There's more. I will say on this trip that the camera's on, you're fake news, you're this, you're that. But people were so kind to me and welcoming. I mean, there were two women, one woman who just absolutely loved Trump, walking with her friend who absolutely loved Hillary Clinton. So the country's divided in some places, but are they behind the scenes?
I think behind the scenes, especially with senators who've been there a long time, I think they're still somewhat friendly. Yes. I think they still somewhat like each other. I think they want to figure out a better way to do this, but they also, when the cameras are on or they're back in their home districts or they know they have an election coming up, they have to say what they have to say. I think it's a little different in the House because there's so many new people and we're probably going to have a lot of turnover again.
Right.
But there
are some
I play in a congressional softball game,
exactly.
And on the other side are women from Congress who are Republicans and Democrats, and they enjoy hanging out.
I know, but you know what? It's much truer among the women.
Yes,
much
this
truer.
is true.
And the last bit of bipartisanship in the Senate is among the women.
And by the way, you know, I mean, we're focused on the elected officials. I think your point is much more important. Among the American people, we still like each other. We can have these political arguments, and we can have disagreements, and it's only the extremes in both sides who make this a make-or-break issue at every
young people, and this is totally anecdotal, but I see my mom, 70-something years old, in Texas, Southern black woman, lived through the civil rights era, And she is scared. And some of this is watching too much MSNBC, don't get me wrong. But
yes, please, stop her.
But she is worried about where the country is going, more so worried than during the civil rights era, which I was not alive for, clearly. And that worry is going to continue to tear people apart further.
Well, there's major consensus. The thing is, the voters are united in many ways on many things. There's major consensus on a whole series of issues. There's major consensus in the country on what we should do about immigration. There's major consensus on what we should do about guns. There's major consensus on many things on what we should do on the economy. The problem is that our institutions and our politics no longer pays attention to what the major consensus is. So we have a practice of politics in Washington where if they went along with what 70% of the country wanted to do, all of these things would be solved, but they don't.
But you see why. When you see the example in New York's 14th District, fewer than 5% of the eligible voters turned out to vote. And what you have then is the most extreme people turning out to vote, and then those are the people who are elected.
And quickly in New York, big surprise in New York.
Absolutely.
Christie, with
yes,
the 28-year-old.
Yes, but no. In today's environment, party primaries are the most dangerous territory for anybody to try to navigate right now. And Joe Crowley learned it this past week. And let me tell you this.
5%.
You
have to pay attention.
Not only do you have to campaign, but sometimes in this environment, the most extreme are rewarded. And we've seen that in a bunch of different places.
She was much more culturally in line with that district.
That's true.
He was much more culturally in line with that district. And much has been made about her stands on certain issues. Her stand on Medicare for all and her stand on single payer is way more supported by the country than Donald Trump's tax cuts, than Donald Trump's immigration plan, and than Donald Trump's stand on guns.
Abolish ICE. Yeah. Do you think that's a good way to campaign? I mean, that seems to
crazy.
It's
crazy.
Listen, abolishing a state, well, if we want to talk about a state agency we should look at, let's also look at TSA for all of us who travel to the state. Let's also look at that.
Our snacks.
I think the questions be raised. Obviously, ICE and the people that work for ICE are a function of the leadership. And a function of what they do is a function of what they're being told to do and what they're encouraged to do and what's being
unsaid. But the point of getting rid of it's a terrible idea.
And here's what's the problem in our politics today, real quick. So she wins the primary by saying abolish ICE. So what happens? Kirsten Gillibrand, who's supposed to be smarter, says abolish ICE. Kamala Harris comes out and says, and the lemmings start following down the line because they're following what they think was the result of a primary and they want to run for president. That's not leadership. And that's why people are cynical. Stuff like that, no one thinks we should abolish immigration and customs enforcement. Come on.
Okay, and that's going to be the final word. Happy 4th of July.
Let me just tell you this. This is a serious point. The best part of the show are the flashbacks where she tries to figure out where was the point when it was too late.
Right.
Where was it?
I get it.
Where was the point where if we had all just risen up, if we just done something, but because it happens in little increments.
That's right. That's how fascism works.
That's how fascism works.
They do it in little.
And listen, we have a president.
We lose one norm a week.
We have a president who, by the way, was not elected by the people and constantly refers to himself.
Yes.
He's constantly referring to himself in the Third Reich, and it's.
No, you and I were on this page before anybody else, that he was serious about running and that he absolutely could run and probably would.
4 months before the election,
maybe they will listen to us now.
Well, they didn't listen before.
No, they're not going
to. Listen, but seriously, they have to listen. They have to, people, where are you? You have to listen. You have to listen this time because he is going to win the 2020 election.
Even if he doesn't, he's not going to leave.
And he's not. I don't think
that's what you have to understand.
He won't leave after the second term if he doesn't have to, and nobody stops him. This man believes in being president for life.
Yes.
He said a few weeks ago, Roosevelt got 4 terms. Why can't I?
Yes.
Go down the whole. He loves President Xi, President Kim.
He's hot for life. Dictators, baby.
He loves the dictators. And I'm telling you, my friends, if we don't stop it now, you'll look back at the show where we were all goofing around talking about The Handmaid's Tale. But this is the moment. The moment that he said that he was going to appoint someone to the Supreme Court, and we know this is the person, as you said earlier.
What's your movie about?
We're not going to plug anything here.
What are you talking about? We talked about his fucking show for 5 minutes.
The Handmaid's Tale. No, my movie. I'm finishing my movie. and getting it out before the midterms because I want millions of people to get to the polls.
Yeah, that's...
And when you...
Correspondent and a CBS News political analyst. Sungmin Kim covers the White House from over on Capitol Hill for the Washington Post. Ramesh Ponnuru is a senior editor at the National Review and a columnist for Bloomberg View. And Jan Crawford, of course, is our CBS News chief legal correspondent. Jan, you've been incredibly busy this week. And I know you, first with the travel ban, now with the what's next. And this list of contenders, it sounds like you see 5 main names that the president's focused in on now.
Right, and the president has said he's narrowed down this list of 25, big list that he had down to just a handful. And I think right now there are 2 leading contenders, both federal appeals court judges, one here at the prestigious D.C. Circuit, Brett Kavanaugh. He kind of has those elite credentials the president says he wants. Yale Law School, he clerked for Justice Kennedy. And he's been on the appeals court here for 12 years. He has a lot of experience. He's highly regarded both sides of the aisle. But he also kind of has that regular guy persona. He coaches his 2 daughters' basketball teams. Then the other potential leading contender, federal appeals court judge Amy Coney Barrett. She would bring real diversity to the Supreme Court. She would be the first conservative female justice. And she also would be the only justice who's not from the Ivy League. She went to Notre Dame Law School, then came here, clerked for Justice Scalia, and then went back to teach at Notre Dame. Conservatives like her because she had a brutal confirmation hearing, and she really turned the tables on the Democrats. They were trying to say that her Catholic faith meant she would overturn Roe versus Wade. So she really walked through the fire and survived and actually got 3 Democrats to vote for her.
Well, it's interesting you highlight that. I know Senator Susan Collins will be a key Republican vote, has said she won't vote for any nominee who would overturned Roe v. Wade.
And she voted for Barrett for the appeals court.
She did.
She did. And so I think, that's what you're going to see all the focus on now is this is going to be a fight over abortion rights. Now, I shouldn't, before we go on, there are a few others he's looking at, all federal appeals court judges, a couple he's interviewed before for the Scalia vacancy, Multh Thapar, Raymond Kethledge, Thomas Hardiman, and then another woman, Joan Larson. Those are kind of, we believe, to be other contenders.
And what is the president's thinking on this? I mean, it seems like this is an actual process that's underway. He's often criticized for not, going by the book.
No, they've been very methodical about it. They have this list. They've vetted a lot of these candidates already. They've got a timetable. You're going to get a nominee a week from tomorrow because that's going to be the average amount of time between a nomination and a confirmation, and they want that justice on the Supreme Court for the first Monday in October. So we're going to have a vote, sources tell me, by the end of August or right after Labor Day. So it's very methodical. He's already started interviews. And this is really a Supreme Court nomination, as you know, that's a president's most lasting legacy. Mm-hmm. These justices will be on the Supreme Court long after the president has left this town. And this may not be the president's last nomination.
Well, exactly. Ramesh, even conservatives who were critical of President Trump, when it came to his last Supreme Court justice, they were praising him. This time around, what are they looking for?
They're looking for more of the same. They have been impressed not only by the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, but also by the federal appellate court nominations, where the president has put up a series of extremely well-credentialed, well-respected, solid conservatives. That's what they're looking for here, and I think that's what they're going to get. This president understands the importance of conservative judges to his coalition. He understands that it helped get him elected in the first place, and I think he's going to deliver.
Jamel, Democrats, like you heard Senator Blumenthal on the program, were sounding the alarm bell that this is going to bring up a lot of sort of culture war issues, for lack of a better term, abortion, gay rights, affirmative action. Cynics argue this is really just about scaring people into turning out in the polls in November to vote in these congressional races. How do you view this, and how should Americans view this?
I don't think that the cynical view that this is just trying to scare up voters is quite right. I think the conversation on the left, recognizing the extent to which the court will have a solid conservative majority for some time now, has turned to what do left-wing policy thinkers, what do left-wing politicians, what does a Democratic coalition do in a world where there's a Supreme Court that's potentially hostile, not just to culture war issues, but also to issues of economic equality, issues of labor rights? How does a left organize itself in that context? And so what I think you're seeing among Democrats, some Democrats, among left-wing thinkers, among liberal thinkers, is what does our politics look like if we have to potentially deal with a court that is hostile to a single-payer healthcare program? What do our politics look like when we have a court that is hostile to union organizing, that is hostile to labor rights? And I'm not sure that there's really an answer there yet. There has been some kind of early discussion about attempts to kind of circumvent the court by, say, adding additional justices.
Right.
Which, I mean, the thing about that, right, is that like it didn't quite fail in the 1930s. It was the threat of it ended up getting the outcome they wanted. And there's some
regret, right, among progressives who had pushed for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to have stepped down during the Obama presidency, and that obviously didn't happen.
Right. But I think that the broad picture is the left is kind of, Democrats, liberals, the broad center left is sort of, we've lost this battle. We've lost the battle for the Supreme Court. And so we need to figure out how to reconfigure our politics and our approach to deal with that fact.
Sungmin, what does this confirmation process look like? Is October realistic to have this judge seated?
I think it's absolutely realistic. If you take the July 9th date that the president says he will announce his pick, if the Supreme Court convenes on the first Monday in October, Gorsuch was confirmed in just over 2 months from naming to confirmation. So that is a completely reasonable timeline, considering Mitch McConnell has already canceled the August recess. We thought maybe for a second that he would uncancel the August recess, but I think with the major Supreme Court confirmation, we will be here through August. But the process is very similar. You know, we've got the White House portion right now with vetting of the names and the interviewing of the names. Once the nominee is announced, that nominee will make the courtesy visits to senators on the Judiciary Committee, to these key persuadable swing Senate votes, members of leadership. And we're already seeing that outreach from the White House to the Senate right now. I mean, we talked earlier about how this White House hasn't been so great at a lot of the legislative coordination and some of the mishaps that they've had with Congress. But on judicial nominations, this is a thing that the White House does very well. So you've already had Senator Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who are really closely watching, because these are senators or Republican senators who support abortion rights. They've had their meeting at the White House with the president. You've had Senators Joe Donnelly, Joe Manchin, and Heidi Heitkamp, who are the three red state Democrats who voted in favor of Neil Gorsuch, get their own personal meeting with President Trump, and who say they're very open to confirming President Trump's nominee if the nominee is the right person. So those are the 5 senators who our attention is going to be really on for the next 2 months.
And what about immigration? Jan, you think this could actually come before the Supreme Court?
Oh, sure. I mean, the issue of immigration, absolutely. And I mean, we already see...
You already had the travel ban.
Right. But one of the things I think that's really interesting that we've seen in the last year and a half is these lower courts take a look at some of the president's policies, is that you have federal judges, one federal judge ruling a whole nationwide program unconstitutional. So a federal judge is essentially, one federal judge can be anywhere in the country, is setting federal policy. And the justices are really concerned about that. You saw Justice Thomas last week write separately, saying that the Supreme Court eventually is going to have to take this issue up, these nationwide injunctions being handed down by one federal judge. So this could be an issue that may lead to something like that. But on immigration, the other thing I think is, think about the Supreme Court hearings. That also could be an issue in these hearings. And there is a nominee, a potential nominee, Amul Thapar, who would be an immigrant. He's the son of immigrants. He would be the first Indian American on the Supreme Court. So he's kind of an interesting person to kind of keep in mind. That would make immigration, I think, kind of central in some of those hearings if he were the pick. It'll probably be central anyway, though.
Do you expect it to be, Ramesh?
Well, I think that it could very well. You know, these hearings tend to be wide-ranging. One thing that I think is interesting, someone mentioned West Virginia, Indiana, North Dakota, senators from those states who are red state Democrats who are being watched. All of them were in tough re-election bids this year. That's one of the reasons that Senator Durbin, the Democrat from Illinois, was saying that Democratic voters need to understand we can't block the appointment of a conservative nominee because the map this year is going to put them under pressure on abortion, on immigration, on judicial appointments generally to vote with the conservatives.
Although Joe Manchin, I think yesterday, said that he wouldn't support a nominee that opposed Roe v. Wade, or in that basic language.
He signaled that he was uncomfortable with it, but he didn't draw the line.
I think it'll be interesting to see how this all interacts with the elections in November, because if there's a nominee confirmed before the election, it may not. Conservative voters may say, "Oh no, we've won this. There's no reason to be energized about it." And Democratic voters may end up getting the enthusiasm boost from the fact that not just that there's the potential of further Supreme Court battles down the line, and in order to stop that, in order to stop an additional Trump appointment or nomination, they have to come out and vote in the elections.
Thank you very much. So much more we can talk about, but we got to leave it there. We'll be back in a moment.